Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about the poetry of Murari, who was a 9th century courtier from eastern India. He was a Brahmin, so he was very upper class in the caste system. He would have been well educated, etc., etc. And it says, so I'm reading his work out of the Norton Anthology of World Literature. So the same disclaimer as with all of the poets that I read out of the Norton Anthology, we have a very, very limited selection of Murari's poems. But the way that the Norton editors describe his work is that he was praised for his highly elegant language, intricate craftsmanship, and wide-ranging literary allusions. Now, one of the things I find really striking about Murari's poetry, his style is based not just on images, which is very, very common in Sanskrit poetry, but on these really striking, surprising images. Things that you wouldn't necessarily expect. Things that are not necessarily, I don't want to say logical, because it's not that they're illogical, it's that they're creative images. In a way like Dylan Thomas, one of my absolute favorite poets. I've talked about him in a different video. Dylan Thomas uses these stunning, striking, startling images continually. Murari does the same kind of thing. So here's an example. Is the moonlight nothing but the powder of the cleansing nut with which this sea of darkness has been scrubbed bright, and its residue precipitated to the bottom as shadows? Or could the moon's rays be a group of carpenters who polished the tree of heaven by planing it clean, leaving its fallen bark for shadows? I mean, these are crazy images. There's nothing necessarily logical about the connections between the moon as something that is cleaned, a section of the night that is cleaned, or a tree that has been planed down. But they're very striking images. And it's worth noting about both of these images. We have two major images in this poem. They both involve labor, cleaning or planing a tree down. That's a very interesting point, because it suggests a particular attitude toward the moon itself, the moon as related to work, and particularly related to work that changes the physical properties of something. Cleaning something, knocking the dirt and the grime and stuff off of it, or physically changing the shape of a tree through carpentry. And it's interesting that these two comparisons are used because the moon, across many cultures, has been associated with change, which of course makes sense because it waxes and wanes, it comes and goes every month. So one of the associations traditionally with the moon across many cultures, and I don't know 9th century India well enough to know if this was a common association with the moon in 9th century India, but across many cultures, one of the associations of the moon is with change, with fluctuation, with variation. And so this idea that the moon is attached to the physical labor of change is really quite interesting here. We've got another one that again has these really interesting, striking images. O pearl free of flaw, and by the way, none of these have titles. They are listed with numbers in the Norton Anthology, and those numbers were assigned to them by Vidyakara in the book Subhasitarat Nakosa, which is probably wrong, I'm almost certainly pronouncing that incorrectly. I don't speak Sanskrit. But the numbers are kind of meaningless in terms of titles of the poem, so I'm just going to give you the poems. O pearl free from flaws, publish yourself. Go furnish a house or a king's necklace with your splendor. Bring your own virtues to fruit. Why waste your life shut up in an oyster shell? The ocean is enormous. Who in this hole can even calculate your worth? So again, we've got these somewhat odd, eccentric comparisons, like telling the pearl to bring its own virtues to fruit. This is not necessarily as image-driven as the first poem about the moonlight, but we do have a very similar component where a natural element, in this case the pearl, is associated with sort of self-definition. So in that first poem, the moonlight was associated with labor, with doing work to create physical change in the world. Here, the pearl itself is exhorted to go out and be admired, basically, to go out and adorn, to furnish a house or a king's necklace, to bring its own virtues to fruit. So again, we have this element of change here that's associated with an element of the natural world, and this idea of through labor or through one's activity, one's actions, bringing about change in the world, driven really by an inanimate object within the natural world. The last one I want to read you, a little bit different. This is an old age poem, essentially. This is probably, I imagine, quite late in Murari's career. It's a striking poem, in part because I like it because it's about theater, essentially, or it plays on a metaphor of theater, and I'm a theater scholar primarily. So here it is. My limbs are frail, my voice is weak, I suck up to the powerful, I've been reduced to an actor in a farce. I don't know in what new play old age will cast me, to play my part with this white hair for makeup. So this is an interesting one. There's a lot of stuff out there about life as a kind of performance, life as theater, essentially. Shakespeare famously says, all the world's a stage. This idea that the world is a theater, or the existence, life is performance, of course implies that at different times we likely play different roles. And that's what's driving Murari's poem here. This idea that old age has physically changed him. So again, we've got that element of change. We're seeing this consistently across many of these poems. This idea of fluctuation, of change in the world. And here he has been changed into an old man. He's been changed into a different character within the play. And because it's not a role that he is used to, because this is not the role that he has become comfortable with, he has to renegotiate his identity. He has to figure out what this new part he has to play is going to require of him, and how he's going to fulfill that role with his new costume of frail limbs, a weak voice, white hair, etc., etc.